and I'm in the shower, it's the morning, I'm getting ready for my day, and my phone rings. And to this day, like, I have no idea how they got my number, but they did, and it was Apple.
Our guest today is Jonathan Mann, who holds the Guinness World Record for the most consecutive days writing a song. He began his Song a Day project on January 1st, 2009, and the upcoming New Year's Day will mark an even 10 years of writing and recording and publishing online one new song every day. His story is an amazing and inspiring example of how showing up regularly, creating content, and sharing it with the world can open up opportunities that we have not even imagined. In our discussion, Jonathan tells me what happened on the day one of his songs was used to open up a Steve Jobs press conference and how that moment led to him becoming the Conference Troubadour. As the Conference Troubadour, Jonathan is hired to attend conferences. He listens to the sessions over the course of the day, composes a song that includes the key messages of the event, and closes the conference by singing the song with the attendees participating, and he always includes a chorus that he teaches to the audience. Now, about 90% of the songs on the radio are about love, as if that was the only topic in the world worth singing about. When you write a song every day, you need to expand your repertoire of topics. So Jonathan's songs are incredibly inventive, and they cover just about everything else. He has attended conferences and written songs about topics as diverse as the National Apartment Association, medical case management, and internal company communications. As an example, one of my favorites of the songs that he's posted to YouTube is the iOS autocomplete song, in which the entire lyrics are composed by the autocomplete function on an iPhone. You can learn more about Jonathan on his website, jonathanmann.net, and that's JONATHANMANN.net, and check the show notes for a link. On his site, you can reach out to him about having him attend your next conference or for a personal or business commission. In addition to his conference work, he will compose a song to celebrate a birthday, anniversary, or other special event, or write a song about your company. In this episode, we have a few samples of his work, and I hope you enjoy the discussion as much as I did. And by the way, Jonathan, in celebrating 10 years of doing what he does, he's launching a challenge for the month of January 2019 that he calls #Jamuary, and he's asking folks to write and publish a song every day. Now, for those of us who are not composers, I think we can expand that challenge to write something or post something every day. Maybe you'll do a daily podcast, maybe a daily blog post, maybe a daily video, and post it every day. And you can do #Jamuary and see what happens. Side note, if you visit umbrex.com/unleashed, you can sign up to receive the weekly Unleashed email that includes a transcript of every episode, book recommendations, and consulting tips. And if you enjoyed this episode, I hope you'll share it with a few friends, or consider sharing a link online, or even writing a review on iTunes, which helps make others aware of this show. Thanks for listening.
There's an awful lot of hoopla, around the iPhone antenna. When you grip it with your death grip, and your call slips away.
Hello, Jonathan. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So you help end a day at a conference in a slightly unusual fashion. Tell me a little bit about what you do.
Sure. So for the last 8 or 9 years, I have been doing this thing that I call the Conference Troubadour. And you can think of it as a little bit like sketch notes. If you've ever been to a conference and you've seen someone who is frantically drawing on a whiteboard everything that the speaker is saying, and then at the end they have this beautiful mural of words and pictures and things that sort of recap everything that happened in the conference. I do that exact same thing, except I do it with songs. So I watch all the talks. I do it in a variety of ways, but typically, the sort of prototypical way I do it is, at a TED-style conference where there's one track and there's a bunch of speakers and it's a whole day and there's breaks and there's lunch and there's speakers. I watch all those talks. I sit in the back and I'm furiously taking notes. The notes I take end up being like 3 or 4 pages of just like everything that I hear that I think could, is important and should go into the song. And then over the course of the breaks and the lunch and everything, I'm putting the song together. And then at the very end of the day, I get up, everyone has their sort of heads full of all these ideas and are sort of swimming in the avalanche of, I'm mixing my metaphors here, but they're just like, their heads are really full. And my goal is to sort of bring everything together at the end into one sort of crystallized song that leaves everybody, they leave the conference with this song sort of reverberating in their heads. And hopefully, the goal is to entertain, but also to drive home the sort of core messages of whatever the conference is. And a key part of it is getting everyone to sing along. Like it always has a chorus that is sort of the real heart of the matter. And I teach everyone that chorus and we sing it together. And then I sing the song and we're all singing and it's really nice. It's a really great way to end a conference.
So just to kind of help me and the listeners kind of get a real feel for what you're doing, before we explore this in more depth, you have sent a clip that we can play. Tee up that clip for us. We'll play a sample of one of your end of the day songs, but to kind of tee it up for us.
Sure. So this is one of my favorite ones, just in terms of the way it sounds, in terms of like the recording and the song. Is this company called L2. They were just recently purchased by Gartner. They do a lot of like brand stuff and they do analytics about how different brands are doing. Anyway, so I sat through this long day full of various speakers talking about how different companies are doing in digital, and all this different stuff. And so this is the song. What you'll hear is me singing along with the audience, the chorus that I made that sort of encapsulated everything from this L2 conference here in New York City.
All right, let's take a listen.
Amazon's pulling away. You better have a strategy for dealing with Amazon pulling away. Capital all the way. You better have a strategy for dealing. Amazon pulling away. Amazon's pulling away. You better find a strategy for dealing. Amazon pulling away. She's capital all. You guys are so good. You better have a strategy for dealing with Amazon pulling away. For dealing. Amazon's pulling away. That's right. With Amazon pulling away. Thank you.
Jonathan, that was awesome. Thank you for sharing that one.
Yeah, of course.
So tell me a little bit about, I guess I'm curious about so many pieces of this. The first piece is, do you come up with like a new melody each time, or do you have a template of maybe 20 different kind of melodies and frames? Because I can't imagine you not just writing the lyrics, but also coming up with like everything from scratch. Or how does that work? Tell me a little bit about, are there some things that you're able to kind of reuse a little bit?
Sure. So let's back up a little bit. I mean, I will answer that question, and it's actually that the answer to that question has changed a little bit recently in some ways. So my whole thing is that I write a song a day. And I've been writing a song and posting a video to YouTube every day for the last 3,633 days. It'll be 10 years on the 1st of January in a little under a month. And so this whole endeavor has sort of grown out of that. I don't think I'd be able to do what I do had I not trained myself on this sort of song a day regimen. And in fact, the story of how I started doing it sort of comes out of it came directly out of things that I did with Song a Day.
So let's start with that. Tell us that story. I mean,
Sure.
Because that's got to be closing in on the Guinness Book for like longest streak of composing one song per day. That is amazing. How did you start?
So I actually have the Guinness record. They made a new record just for me that didn't exist before. It's called The Most Consecutive Days Writing a Song.
Awesome.
And they gave me that record. And so, January 1st of 2009, I decided that I was going to start writing a song a day and posting it to YouTube every day. And it was only supposed to go for 31 days. And it, after 31 days, I was sort of having such a good time doing it that I decided to just keep going. It helped that I was unemployed at the time, newly out of school. It was at the height of the financial crash. So I just kept going, and I decided to try for a year. And after a year, things were going well, so I decided to keep going. And most of the songs don't have that many views on YouTube. Like I don't have like this ginormous audience or anything, but occasionally the songs go viral. And so there's a bunch of those kinds of examples of the songs that have gone viral. And through a crazy set of circumstances, like one of the biggest songs that went viral was this one called the iPhone 4 antenna song. It happened back with the iPhone 4. There was this thing that happened where if you held the phone a certain way, you would lose some antenna for, you would lose some antenna bars or whatever. And it was this big scandal. It was everywhere. And on the eve of this press conference that Steve Jobs was calling in order to sort of deal with this, it was called Antennagate.
Right, I remember that,
at
sure.
the time. Yeah, Antennagate. So if you remember Antennagate, it was like this big deal, and Steve Jobs was going to have this big press conference to deal with it. And on the eve of that press conference, on the night before, my song of the day was just this song, basically like in a really silly way, like defending Apple. And I could give you a clip here of like the chorus of that song. So here's the chorus. Here's the chorus to the song that I made, sort of defending Apple on the eve of this press conference.
Okay, let's listen.
Let's all sing this song. It goes, if you don't want an iPhone 4, don't buy it. If you bought one and you don't like, bring it back. If you don't want an iPhone 4, don't buy it. If you bought one and you don't like, bring it back. Everybody don't want an iPhone 4, don't buy it. If you bought one and you don't like, bring it back. If you don't want an iPhone 4, don't buy it. If you bought one and you don't like, bring it back.
Okay, that was awesome.
Okay, and so I post that and I go to bed, and the next morning I have an email in my inbox, and it says it's from @apple.com. It says PR@apple.com, and I think that it's a fake. Like, it's really easy to spoof email address. You can make an email address look like it's coming from anybody. So I'm like, there's no way that like Apple is actually emailing me. And so I ignore it. I actually ignore the email. And I get in the shower, and I'm in the shower. It's the morning. I'm getting ready for my day, and my phone rings. And to this day, like, I have no idea how they got my number, but they did, and it was Apple, and they were calling me to ask me if they could use the video that I just made literally the night before in my bedroom to open the press conference that Steve Jobs was about to have in Cupertino in like a number of hours. And so just like, 2 hours later after that, literally 8 hours, maybe 9 hours after I'd written the song, Steve Jobs comes out on stage, and his exact words are, "We found that on YouTube this morning and we couldn't help but want to share it." Those were his exact words about my video. And a lot of things sort of happened as a result of that. Like, and so one of the things that happened was that Steve Wozniak, the other co-founder of Apple, his wife hired me to make him a birthday song. And so, I mean, that's another thing that I do is I do a lot of individual commissions for people, and I keep the cost of that really low. I try to do it for as many people as possible. But anyway, so Steve Wozniak's wife has me write this song. I go to his 60th birthday party in San Jose, and I get to present the song, and I meet Steve Wozniak. And at that birthday party, I meet the co-founder of this conference called TEDMed, and he had founded TEDMed, which is sort of loosely but not really affiliated with TED. This guy who had co-founded TEDMed had founded it though with the guy who had actually founded TED, this guy Richard Saul Wurman, and so he hired me to this guy I met, Mark Hodosh, who was the co-founder of TEDMed. He hired me to write a song for the founder of TED, Richard Saul Wurman. And then they brought me to TEDMed in 2010 to present that. And then when I was at TEDMed in 2010, this big TED medical conference, people talking about like crazy brain scans and like new ways to detect cancer and real life tricorders and things like this. That night in my hotel room, for my just because I needed something to write about, that night in my hotel room, my song of the day was recapping the day's worth of talks at TEDMed. And I sent it to Mark Hodosh and Richard Saul Wurman, and they were so into it that the next year in 2011, they had me come up on stage and like do these recap songs. And that was literally the first time that I had done it in public. And it was that was 2011. And it was sort of as a result of that I sort of started doing this, as my living essentially. And so, so yeah, that's a story of really how this thing was born. It's a sort of a very roundabout. It never, occurred to me in any kind of like planned out way that this was even a possibility or something that I would do. It literally just came out of my doing a song every day and just sort of following my nose and a little bit of luck, or maybe a lot of luck in terms of like, who I got access to and this kind of thing. And so, yeah, but to bring it back around and to answer your question, I would say I've learned a lot actually about what makes for a good recap song and what works in that context and what doesn't. And I would say that, prior to maybe about 2 or 3 years ago, I think like I actually honestly have been looking at this, and I feel like in the last maybe 2 years specifically, I had a big shift in how I approached the recap songs, and a big shift too in like how good I was at it, and like what I needed to do to make it a real success every single time. And so when you ask me about like, do I have like a bank of melodies and a bank of things? The answer is no. But what I do have a sense of is like what the song needs to be in order for it to sort of be a success, which is it needs to be very upbeat. It can't be slow at all. The chorus needs to be extremely simple. Which often means that, there's only so many chords to begin with. And if I want the chorus to be really simple for the purposes of teaching it, I have to make sure that the chord progressions are, simple as well. The melodies have to be, especially the chorus melody has to be especially simple. And so in sort of like learning these rules, it's not that I have like a prescripted sort of set way of doing it. It's just that I've learned what works. And more importantly, I guess I've learned what doesn't work. And what's interesting to me is once I started sort of implementing in the last 3 years, once I started sort of implementing these rules on myself, the amount of sort of repeat business and the amount of business that I get as a result of word of mouth from different conferences has like gone through the roof. Like I don't do a conference now that doesn't lead to other work. And that never used to happen when I sort of didn't really sort of follow these guidelines that I've set for myself. And now it's like every single time I do it, it's like a home run. And that may sound like bragging, but I'm actually really excited by it, and sort of like, you know, interested in the idea that I could sort of observe what was working and really tweak it and make it so that it succeeds every time.
Hey, Jonathan, I think, Jonathan, that after writing a song a day for 10 years straight, I think you've reached the point where you can brag a little bit or feel some confidence that you've learned what you're doing. Wow, this is, you know, it's hard to imagine a more clear kind of a better parable or story about the power of just starting a personal project on the side. You know, hey, I'm going to do a song a day for 30 days. I'm going to write every day for 30 days. And, you know, and how that can just open up things that you could never have said, well, I want to be a conference troubadour and, you know, go around and get invited to TED Talks and, you know, be the guy at the end of the day. That's not something that, but sort of your process piece, it's so much like, rather than sort of setting a goal for yourself of this is what I want to do, saying, I'm going to just create a song a day, put it out there and see what happens. Wow. What doesn't work? So you said you figured out what doesn't work. What does not work?
Yeah, in the conference setting, so like the things that, so it's sort of the inverse of what I was saying, what does work. So like, you know, I go back and I listen to some of the, you know, because most of these things are filmed either by me or by the conference. So I can go back and I can see the last 7-8 years worth of conferences that I've done. And I could just see in some of the old ones, like, they're too slow. They kind of plod along. The melodies are either like almost too boring. Like they're so simple. I guess that's interesting. Like they're so simple that they're boring. And I guess maybe there's this line actually that I find myself writing, which is simple enough to learn, but they have to move enough to be interesting. What else? Oftentimes I set myself up now a lot more like for success in terms of knowing what questions to ask of the conference organizers ahead of time. I can think of one conference in particular, like it used to really stump me a little bit when a conference was like multi-track versus single track. Because the single track thing is simple. You know, I sit in the room, I listen to stuff, I get up and I sing the song. Multi-track can be a lot more tricky because not everybody is hearing the same content. And without everybody hearing the same content, a song that recaps some bit of the content throughout the day is like not going to work. And so I remember this one conference in particular where I just was not prepared and I got up and I didn't really have the right kind of song to present. And so a lot of it is the mistakes that I made in the past, just a lot of it have to do with like making sure that I know how to deal with different kind of conference situations. And then just really making sure that the song is super high energy, super upbeat. Oh, you know what another thing is actually that I used to not do that I always make sure to do now is it's really important when you're a guy with a guitar on stage to get the audience on your side as quickly as possible, because a guy with a guitar on stage can be a pretty can be a pretty frightening sight sometimes at a conference. You're like, oh man, this is going to be cheesy or this is going to be bad. Like, this is making me uncomfortable. This is like a conference about, you know, I don't know, banking or something. And like, I don't like this. This is making me uncomfortable. So the thing that I always do now is I always make sure that the conference organizers know that I'm going to give a quick, like 7 to 10 minute introduction about who I am, so that I tell basically the whole story that I just told you about Song a Day and Steve Jobs and like, you know, and all these different things that I've done throughout the course of Song a Day, so that by the end of that little talk, they've laughed, they've understood a little bit about who I am, and it gives them context for like, oh, he's not just some random schmo off the street with a guitar. Like, he's this guy who does a song a day, and this is what he does, and this is part of it. And now it's like an interesting thing where now today's song is going to be this song that we're all going to do together. And like, now they can sort of participate in Song a Day, and that's sort of, you know, exciting in its own way. And I didn't used to do that. It used to just be, and now Jonathan Mann with a song, and I would get up there and I would say a little thing about the song, and then I would sing it, and I would either get them on my side or I wouldn't, but in this other way where I get to introduce myself, it's like I'm guaranteed to sort of get them on my side before I even present the song to them.
Because now they're participating in your story, and it's not just like some random thing. It strikes me that you are in this amazing position of getting to, you know, soak up all this learning and go to all these random cross-section of conferences. Yeah. Tell me a little bit about what's that's been like, you know, aside from the music piece, just like what you've learned and, you know, maybe how interest it sparked, or just, you know, greater like appreciation of, you know, different aspects of the business world. Like, what's that been like going to, you know?
It's been very interesting, to be honest. You know, just there's whole sides of the business world that I just didn't know about. And then suddenly, because of this friends telling friends thing, I'll be doing so last year I just did a ton of internal communications conferences, because I did like one internal communications conference, and then like they recommended me to someone, and so like suddenly I'm doing like 10 internal whereas like before I didn't even know what it was, you know? And so yeah, it is really interesting to hear about, you know, what internal communications people are struggling with, like what they're dealing with, and what people in like, you know, the pharmaceutical world are dealing with, and what they value, and what's interesting to them. And I just did a thing for Barclays, like the bank, and so it's like, so those jobs are starting to come in now. So like dealing with like what are they, you know, what are they up to? And yeah, it's fascinating to sort of get a little glimpse and to see how different everything is, but also it's really interesting how similar, you know, people are all struggling with the same kind of issues of, a lot of it is like technology, and things are moving so fast, and how do they keep up? Like that's a common theme across everything. And you know, how to manage people. I guess it's no surprise. It's just interesting to sort of see it from my vantage point, and have to, oftentimes it's fun. Like one of the most fun things for me and for the audience is like, the less I understand something, or the less I know about something coming in, sort of the more fun it is for me, because I have to just sort of like get context clues. And when I'm taking my notes, one thing I listen for really with a keen ear is like, I watch the room and I listen to people's reactions to what the people are saying. And that's how I know, if I don't know anything else, like that's how I know what's important. If you just listen to what people are laughing at, like what the joke lines are, that tells you tons. If you watch how people lean in or get bored, like it just tells you a lot about like what's what. And that sort of, yeah. But it is really interesting. And similarly, you know, I do a lot of these commissions, these personal commissions, especially around this time of year. I get a lot of holiday commissions for Christmas. And similarly, like, it's just fascinating to get glimpses into people's lives, you know, like who do they want to write a song for, and what's their history, and how do they feel about each other, and what's going on with them. Like, you just get reminded that the world is a very large place, and there's tons of people in the world, and they all are sort of dealing with their own things.
Tell us a little bit more about the kind of range of the types of conferences you'll go to. So you mentioned like pharma and banking and, internal communications, but you go to heavy duty academic.
I keep a running list. Let me look at my list and I'll see like different kinds of tech conferences, design conferences. So some of the more random ones like case management, in terms of like medical case management. Home health is a funny one. Like home care conference people. I did one for the CDC, which is the Centers for Disease Control. I'm doing one in February for the National Apartment Association, which is I don't know anything about, so that'll be something totally new. I did one for like a major watchmaker that I'm not allowed to say who they are. They gave me an NDA, but I did one like for a watchmaker, which is really interesting to learn about all the ins and outs of watchmaking. Yeah, so that's sort of a good sort of cross section. You can see I have the running list of all of the conferences I've done since 2011 at jonathanmann.net/#CT.
We'll put that link in the show notes. And is that the best place for people to find out more about you, or maybe send an inquiry if they're interested in engaging you for their conference?
Yeah, if you just go to jonathanmann.net, that's the place to all the stuff is there.
It strikes me that, and I'm sure you've thought a lot about this, is that so many songs, if you think about the top 40, it's just about a few different topics. Love songs, country music. I lost my job, and my wife left me, and there's not that many songs about medical case management or about the National Apartment Association. So, in addition to doing a song a day, you're also really kind of expanding the kinds of topics that songs are about.
Yeah, I mean, that's actually something very important to me in general, which is that, 90% of all songs are love songs. On one hand, you could say, well, that's because it's so important, and it is, and that as an emotion, it lends itself very well to composing a song. I often also think that on the other hand, the plethora of love songs sort of is a self-reinforcing thing, where when people think like, oh, what should I write a song about? Like, oh, well, love, like that's what everybody writes. I should write a love song. And the fact is that you can write a song about anything. And, when you do a song a day, you sort of have to, just to keep things interesting. And, so yeah, that's definitely been a huge part of it. There's actually a lineage of writing songs about companies and industries. There's a really rich history of that. In fact, there was a recent Fresh Air with Terry Gross episode where she interviewed some people about the 50s and 60s. There was a huge market for company musicals where literally exactly like I do, with just probably more production value, they would hire top musical producers and writers to come in for their conferences in the 50s and 60s and write, the GM musical, the IBM musical. And that is that's a thing that used to happen. And I find that, I find it weirdly romantic. Like I've always found the kind of songwriter as craftsperson, sort of taking aside like the art of it and just saying like I am a craftsman, like I am manufacturing this thing with my hands. I'm making it. I find that idea sort of romantic in its own kind of way.
Like you got the caterers coming in and you got the people building the set, and you got the
exactly. You got the lighting people, and you got the songwriters. Yeah.
What tell me a little bit about how you think about the lineage of being a troubadour. I mean, it almost harks back to, very literally with the name of what you do, to kind of the troubadour who would be in a king's court and probably singing about some song of the day or the latest knight's adventures. How do you get kind of maybe inspired or connect to that?
Yeah, well, as far as we know, right, like the oldest stories that we have access to, the Epic of Gilgamesh and stuff were sung. You know, they're meant to be sung. They were songs, and they rhymed as a way to make them easier to remember. And you know, no one knows like just how far back music goes. But it's what's obvious and clear, especially if you have kids, is that there's something like really inherent to being a human being with music. There's just, you know, my she's 1.5 now, but you know, my younger daughter, you know, by the time she was like 6 months, as soon as she could sit up, she was dancing, you know, and you put music on and she doesn't know dancing from anything, but it would make her move. And so there's something so fundamental about music. And I do often think like, you know, with climate change and like, I think about society collapsing and like, what would be my role in a society that completely collapses, and like, would I be able to do what I do more as like a traveling troubadour, like going around and like telling the tales of like what's happening in the world, in a sort of pre-industrial kind of situation. Like would that be a viable path for me in our uncertain future? That is definitely something that I've considered.
I'm sure you get asked this a ton, but I'll repeat it again. What do you kind of maintaining a running list of ideas of songs, or is it like that morning you wake up, what am I going to write about today? Or do you have like a Evernote list or some kind of, you know, list on your phone somewhere of, oh, I could write a song about that, I'll put it on the list?
I probably should have a list. I don't. I think it might make my life easier. It just has never been the way that I've done it. It's been mostly just like, occasionally I'll have an idea for a song specifically, and I'll say, oh, that'll be my song of the day. But often if I have like a really solid idea, I'll kind of save it so that I have, because one thing about Song a Day is that the key that I found to making it sustainable is to expand and contract the amount of time that I devote to it, based on the amount of time that I have in my day. So this has always been important, but my son was born 4.5 years ago, and it especially became important once I had kids. It's like all of a sudden my time is not mine anymore, and you know, you always have commitments, you always have stuff you have to do. So on those busy days, on those days when I just like don't, you know, I have a lot of work to do, maybe I have a lot of commissions to write and things, I will just make the song super simple, super short, top of my head, whatever comes out. And if I have a really good idea for a song, I might not do it on that day. I'm going to save it for a day when I have a little bit more time and I can expand my creation, the time that I have to create the song, out to fill the time that I have. And that's been a really important way. I feel like I hear from people a lot who try to do a thing a day. And I feel like this is a really key feature is to not beat yourself up if one day you just have to do something really slapdash. And not every song is going to be good. I have a sort of framework that I work off of called 70-20-10, which is 70% of everything you make is going to be mediocre, period. 20% is going to totally suck and it's going to be bad. And then only 10% of everything you're going to make is going to be really great. And so under that framework, I don't expect that every song is going to be a home run. Obviously it would be nice if it were. And honestly, sometimes you never know like what you're going to get. Some days you sit down and I think, well, I don't have a lot of time and nothing great is going to come out. And some days like I do that and something great does come out, unbeknownst to me. And some days when I have all day to work on it, it's it's trash. It's just, it doesn't come out great. So the amount of time doesn't necessarily tell you what it's going to be. The amount of inspiration you feel doesn't necessarily, map onto how good something is going to be. I think like how good something is going to be is kind of a mystery, especially when you're in just like this generative mode of just like, I'm just going to make something just to see what it is. There's a whole other mode, which is the editing mode. And that's a whole other framework. There's an apocryphal quote that gets attributed to, I'm blanking on his name. The Old Man and the Sea, Hemingway.
Yeah.
It gets attributed to Hemingway. He didn't say it, as far as I can tell, but it's nice to pretend that he does. He did, because the quote is, "Write drunk, edit sober." And so Song a Day, or the framework of making things very quickly or making a lot of things, is the writing drunk part of creation. And in that framework, you really don't know what's going to work and what's not going to work and what's going to be good. The idea is just to like make it and let it sort of just be what it is.
But if
then when it comes time to
go ahead.
Yeah, when it comes time to edit, you'll sit down, you'll take a look at things, and maybe there's pieces over here, and there's something good here, and there's something good there, and you can put it all together, and you come with a more critical eye, with a more sort of tasteful eye, and try to really use your brain to make something as good as it can be. But in terms of just like from your gut, something being good, 70, 20, 10, like the majority of it is going to be crap, but you don't know when you're going to hit that really good 10%.
Wow. But if you wait to say, oh, I'm not going to write one until I have a really good idea and I know it's going to be great.
Yeah.
You never start. And
you never start, and you might end up making something bad anyway. So
what does it actually look like if we were watching you, writing one of these songs, sort of on a maybe not your most slapdash day or the all day version, but kind of a typical day? How long does it take to kind of write? Do you write the lyrics first? Do you write the tune first? Just how does it come together? And tell us a little bit about what that would look like.
Yeah, so there's as many ways to write a song as there are stars in the sky. I mean, it's infinite ways that you could approach writing a song, and sort of infinite combinations of from where you start, and what order you do things. And I would say I don't have one method. And I go through phases. Like lately, for quite a while now, I've been so focused on sort of other projects. I'm very much in the editing mode of, I'm working on like an album that I'm releasing in January that I've been working on like for the last 2 years. That's like my 10-year anniversary album that I'm working on. So that takes up like a lot of my otherwise song a day time. So like a lot of times lately it is pretty slapdash. It's like a lot of times lately I'm doing a lot of just like making things up on the spot, which I never used to do. I used to always write things down. And I'm finding it actually really fun. That's a whole other muscle actually to improv something into existence. But generally, like if I'm actually sitting down to like actually sit down and make a song, I may start with like a line. A line might just come into my head, and I may just start from there. Take that line and write a few more lines, and then grab the guitar and see what it sounds like. I may start with a melody. Maybe when I'm walking or I'm in the shower, a bit of a melody comes into my head, and I come in and I try to deal with something with that. I may start with a track. Like I may sit down, in my studio and produce an entire track into Logic, the software that I use to create music. Like I might make the whole track before I write anything down, and then sort of fit the lyrics into that framework. There's no one way to do it, and everyone sort of has their own method And the best advice for doing it, obviously, is just to start doing it and find what works, what works for you.
What productivity routines or rituals or habits do you have that have really worked well for you?
So my biggest thing is to lower the barriers to getting the things done that you want to get done. So just taking song a day as an example, don't put anything between you. I can't put anything between me and doing the song. Like as few rules, as few barriers between me and doing the song. Like a lot of people would say like, oh no, I need to do the song at the same time every day. That to me would be a barrier. If I put that rule on myself, there's no way I would have been able to keep it up for this long. I would have failed within the first week. I think other people might approach it differently and they might need that kind of structure. I don't know. I don't know if I'm weird in that way or if it's just my personality that I prefer to have my life as little structure as possible. Like that's sort of how I've always been. So I don't know if I'm like the best person to give advice about sort of my productivity methodology, as it were. But anyway, yeah, that's how I approach it. Is like as few barriers as possible is my sort of general advice.
Like what sort of barriers do you avoid other than the kind of same time every day thing? Like what other barriers have you intentionally said no to?
Well, we've already talked about it a little bit, which is like I try not to worry about if the song is going to be good. Technology wise, I use whatever technology is around. I don't try to like travel with if I don't have to, I don't try to travel. I don't try to worry about like, a lot of times people worry about like, oh, if I don't have the right software, if I don't have the right gear, if I don't have the right thing to make this, I'm just not gonna be able to do it properly, which is not the case at all. You can make something, just in terms of posting a song a day, if you have a camera on your cell phone, like you can do what I do. If you have like an instrument and can play it nominally and can write down words, then you could do what I do. And in fact, I'll use this moment to plug. I don't know when this episode is coming out, but I'm inviting people in January for the 10th anniversary of Song a Day this January to undertake the challenge themselves of doing a song a day in January. I'm calling it Jamuary, #Jamuary. And I bought the domain Jamuary.one, which I'm really proud of that domain. And so there's like the rules there, which are very simple, which is just like write a song of any length every day in January, post it and hashtag it with Jamuary, and that's it. And I give like some prompts there. But yeah, like I would say gear is a big one. Like don't worry about having the right stuff. Don't worry about it being good. And don't worry about like putting too many rules about like when or how or any of that of how you're supposed to be doing it.
Yeah, and if I could, for anyone that's not a musician, I love the idea of it, and I think that it's sort of the same thing applies if you've been thinking about doing a video blog or writing a blog or doing a podcast or doing YouTube video, doing something every day and sharing it. #Jamuary.
Jamuary.
Any books that you recommend that you've regularly gifted or have that meant a lot to you?
Oh, that's an interesting question. Man, I don't read lately as much as I should. I don't think so. I generally stay away from sort of advice giving books. My wife says that I'm in this framework that I'm a rebel. And so generally, like, I don't follow people's advice, and I don't like want anyone's advice. So I don't read those kinds of books. I did read a really great fiction book recently called, it was the first book in a trilogy called Broken Earth, the Broken Earth series. It's really fascinating. So I would suggest reading the first book in the Broken Earth trilogy. That would be a good one.
Any musicians you've been particularly influenced by?
Yes. The biggest one, his name is Jonathan Richman, and he's not super popular. He's very well respected and well known sort of in his circles. And he was in the movie. Most people, if they know him from, he was in the movie There's Something About Mary. He was the guy with the guitar in the background of that movie, There's Something About Mary. But he has had maybe the biggest influence on me of anyone, aside from maybe Bob Dylan, who was sort of like my first sort of, when I was 12, Bob Dylan, listening to him is like the reason that I started writing songs and wanted to be a songwriter. And then maybe a few years later, I discovered Jonathan Richman, and his sort of, he was the one that sort of opened my eyes and made it acceptable and possible for me to realize that, like, literally anything could be a song. Like, the kinds of things that he writes songs about are very strange and can be very seemingly sort of esoteric. But it was him sort of doing that I felt like gave me permission to be able to write, to write about all the kinds of things that I do.
Well, Jonathan, this has been such an inspiring conversation. And I hope people will check out your website and, try their own January, and do something every day, and share it.
Man.
It's, what you've done is incredible. So thank you so much for joining. I love hearing your story.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun. Thanks.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Unleashed, the show that explores how to thrive as an independent professional. Unleashed is sponsored by Umbrex, the world's first global community of top-tier independent management consultants. The mission of Umbrex is to create opportunities for independent management consultants to meet, share lessons learned, and collaborate. I'd love to get your feedback and hear any questions that you'd like to see us answer on this show. You can email me at unleashed@umbrex.com. That's UMBREX.com. If you found anything on the show helpful, it would be a real gift if you would let a friend know about the show and take a minute to leave a review on iTunes, Google Play, or Stitcher. And if you subscribe, our show will get delivered to your device every Monday. Our audio engineer is Dave Nelson. Our theme song was composed by Gary Negbauer, and I'm your host, Will Bachman. Thanks for listening.